yesterday we heard a lot from people. Like there was, and one of the things that have stuck in my head is the lagging to leading. And I think women in FM and that leading is a lot of what we can cover off today. So 30 years ago we heard no women in this room. Look at all these talented women here today and my talented panel today. So let's introduce each. So Bonita, if you'd like to go first.
Sure. Yes, I'm Bonita Dukes. I am the Vice President for Facilities Management at Clark Atlanta University. In that role, I oversee the renovation, construction, the facilities operations for the university, the real estate development, and I am an architect, licensed architect by trade. Yeah, just great to be representative of females that are joining the ranks of facilities management and operations.
Hi, I'm Suzanne Musho. I also am an architect, which is crazy. I am the Vice President of Real Estate Development and Sustainable Capital Planning, and also the Chief Architect for the campus at New York Institute of Technology. And in my role, I handle facilities, grounds work, security, environmental health and safety, as well as all the capital. So,
hi, I'm Rayanne Weber. I am the Director of Planning, Design, and Construction at Cal State San Marcos. In my role, I am in charge of all of the major and minor capital projects on campus, as well as all of our moves, signage, and all of our project management. My background is I'm an unlicensed architect, and I'm excited to be here.
Thanks. Good morning. My name is Erica Westgard. I'm with C&W Services, and my role is Vice President of Operations. So I have responsibility for the Southeast region of the United States. I am responsible for all of our outsourced client contracts in the Southeast region, providing integrated facilities management to a number of industries, including higher ed. So good morning.
And I'm Jodi Swinburne. So I'm the odd one out. I'm the Australian. I'm also not an architect or came through university in a strong facilities management or engineering background. I'm actually a qualified accountant. So don't hold that against me. But I got heavily involved 20 years ago in property, construction, services, big property portfolios, land banking, design, development of master plan communities. So not just on the finance side of it, but also how to operate them going forward. So I came from, I was a client of Cushman & Wakefield. So that's how I ended up in Cushman & Wakefield. And then a year ago, came to America to work for C&W Services. So Erica is part of my team. So I am loving it every day because it's actually what we love to do. So I'm really passionate about this. So first, and this is why I don't understand, how can facilities management not be seen in a more glamorous light? Right? It is an amazing occupation to have. So take me through any of the rebranding ideas or what's some of the deterrents that you've seen. So Rayanne, do you want to go first?
Sure. So currently at the CSU, we are definitely experiencing kind of a rebranding of our facilities. And we have women spanning from our Assistant Vice Chancellor of Capital Planning, Design, and Construction all the way down to, or all the way up to our third shift custodians. And we're also beginning to really see women applicants starting to apply for positions within our skilled trades. I know that this is probably a little atypical of a lot of facilities management, but really we hope that this is the trend moving forward.
Suzanne, you had some comments on this when we were catching up.
I did. When I was hired in my role, I was actually called the Vice President of Facilities Management, and I rebranded it to Real Estate Development. And I did that because I started my role right before the pandemic, and my staff really kind of suffered the brunt of the financial impact of the pandemic. And they were the first to leave, but they were also the first to come back. And they were the ones that made the university safe and beautiful and a place where students could be. And so I really am trying to make sure that people understand that our role is about hospitality, it's about anticipating needs, it's about creating student success, And I think when you start doing that, you actually attract a lot more people, including women, who really do have an interest in changing the world, right? So that's sort of what how I think that we can start rebranding.
So you touched on a point that's really important about the attracting and retaining talent. And so Bonita, the next one for you, representation is everything in this industry. So take us through in terms of your thoughts and what you've seen.
Of course, great question. So I see facilities management entities as reflective of the diverse world that we live and work in. And so that means that it should be an equal distribution of gender. And so while we've made tremendous strides in gender equality over the past few decades, we still have a little more work to do. And, you know, before we start going into really talking about representation among women, I kind of want to unpack a little bit about the role of a facilities management. And with that role, you know, we are just, we're dispelling a lot of the myths that this role, our only role, is just as a service support category, within that service support category, rather than an integral and an important function in the development and growth of institutions. And so once you start really kind of unpacking what we actually do, that opens up a lot of doors for a lot of people with diverse expertise, and especially women who traditionally are able to juggle a lot of different priorities, which is what you have to do within facilities management. That enables us, you know, it's also important to understand that fact that that natural trait that, you know, most women have with not only problem solving, but also strategic tasking, not multitasking, strategic tasking, and it's something that I coined. And those are qualities that are important for a facilities leader. And the more that we get organizations to understand that our contribution to the corporate strategy and fulfillment of the mission of the institution, the more that we get them to understand that we have a role, but those will be more critical roles, and we'll be able to see more women in those roles.
So, Brianne, you came at it from looking at the US market and the proportion of women working in the market. So do you want to talk us through a little bit about that in your perspective?
Women currently make up about half of our U.S. workforce, and yet we are still seeing quite huge disparities in management roles and salaries. So seeing women in facilities management roles that are typically male-dominated make it a lot more attainable. Working in higher ed, I really hope that female students see women equally represented on campus and are encouraged to pursue interests that they may have not otherwise been exposed to. So many of our students at Cal State San Marcos stay within our local community and are hired for positions on our campus. So having that exposure is, you know, while they're in school is really important.
It's one of the things that when we were talking about this, we were, you know, a lot of people think of FM and think, well, you're just here to fix what's broken, right? And I think we're hearing from a lot of people, and especially yesterday, that there's more than just about fixing what's broken, but it's also about looking at the planning and the strategies and everything that's coming. So Suzanne, we were talking about diversity, right, and the criticality. So take us through the diversity and inclusive, especially moving from that perception of FM being, I'm just here to get on the tools or on the mop, in our case, in some stages, to fix things, to looking forward, right?
Yeah, I mean, in my experience, facilities teams tend to be diverse, but it's not necessarily in leadership roles. And so making sure that there is a path for people to see that they can advance is really important, not only for women, but for everyone. And I think the other thing that about facilities is that we do need to make sure that they know that they have a significant role at the university. And that I'll just continue to underscore that. I think that, you know, now I make sure that my teams are invited to student meetings. I make sure that my sustainability team has a sustainability town hall with the students. The students are constantly seeing that interface. And so all of a sudden, people have a face and people have ideals, and they see that we have common things that we share. And I think as soon as people start to see a path to success, I honestly think that's the piece. I mean, when you're in these roles and you feel like I am always going to be a cleaner, I am always going to be a class 1 engineer. They need to see the path of development. We take training very seriously at our university, so we actually elevated our associate director of environmental health and safety to include training, and so we offer OSHA 40 training, even though it's not required. Things like this, I think, help people to see, yes, you can start here, but you can also advance, and that helps with diversity because, again, no one wants the same job for their entire lives. Everybody wants we all want the same thing. It's similar to yesterday we were talking about construction, and I was saying that one of the reasons why it's hard to get construction workers and why there is a labor crisis is because they also want to be home. They also want to go to the baseball games of their sons and daughters, They all saw the same thing we saw, that there was opportunity to be with your family. So I say, give people a path to success and we'll have the diversity that we need,
So we've talked about the rebranding and everything else and the career pathing that we should all participate. So I'm going to turn it back around and say, what have you been working on to advocate for yourself in your career? And how do you think the self-advocation in terms of what you've chased after has opened up opportunities for you? So I'm going to throw it to Erica because you've managed to be quiet so far.
I have.
And I'll block my ears if you think it's a career-limiting move or anything else.
Thank you. Well, you have to advocate for yourself. That's step one. Speak up. And that's what through mentorship, through being a sponsor, and that's what I tell the folks that work with me and really support them in that. Don't be shy, don't be bashful. You have to self-advocate to be able to express your goals, be able to express your wants, your wishes, other things that you can do kind of within that self-advocacy space is building relationships with colleagues, building relationships with decision makers. And how do you do some of those things? It's by being trustworthy. It's by being transparent. It's by doing what you say you're going to do, right? No different than whether you're a man or a woman in the business. But as women, we have to really be able to have that confidence to stand up and speak up. I think back to probably earlier in my career, I'd be in a conference room and I'd be thinking about something to say, and I wouldn't quite get it out, and then somebody else would say it first. I'm like, man, they got credit for what I was thinking. I should have spoken up. And so you look back on those opportunities where maybe you overlooked them and speak up.
Suzanne, you spoke about obstacles in this space in terms of what you had to overcome.
Yeah.
In terms of...
I think, I was really fortunate. I was raised in a family where there were nothing different I was one of 4 kids, 2 boys, 2 girls. We all, were treated the same and all imagined we'd go to college and grad school. And I think maybe I wasn't prepared for for being in the conference room where I was the only woman. And I was like 25 and everybody else was older and knew more. And the obstacles were just, there. They were there. And so how do you deal with them? And fortunately, the firm that I worked with, it was I Am Pay and Partners. And there were just these wonderful project managers, these men who just said, come on, I'll teach you. I learned cost estimating. No one needed to teach me that, So I think the obstacles are there. They're sort of implicit and also very physical. Mm-hmm. But the more you stay open-minded and the more you kind of advocate for yourself and really realize that people want you there, they want your perspective. So
I think, Ryan, you made a comment when we were talking about this that I put in I suppose I call it the courage bucket, which is asking difficult questions publicly. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Kind of just touching upon everything that everyone's said, it really is advocating for yourself and not being afraid to ask those difficult questions. So many of us are taught, at a young age that it's disrespectful to, question your elders or just have that level of respect. And I think you can have those conversations in a respectful way, but also question things that are outside of your normal thinking. And that's what makes us all diverse. And I really think having the ability to empower women to ask difficult questions, stand up at the table, be leaders, get out there and do things that are outside of your normal expertise, pushing that envelope is really important.
Add to that?
Absolutely.
I just wanted to also add that it's also equally important to understand that we do have allies out there, and they are very important to our development. I was fortunate to be developed throughout my career by having some very good allies, both male and female, in the CFO roles, in the president roles, and they saw the need, and they saw that it should be good representation, good gender representation. However, that didn't take away, excuse me, from the obstacles. I was fortunate to have strong women in my family, as well as strong men in my family to help my path. However, at the institutions that I see a lot of students that actually look to me because of the role that I'm in to help them in their path. So it's really good, and it's really encouraging to see that just by our presence in our roles and doing our roles well, we're actually helping the next generation too.
Just to tag on to that, I think it's our responsibility to help others, right, and to open the door for the next generation of women coming behind us. And so I think that's fantastic that you've got students and other faculty, staff, administration that are looking up to you in that role. And I've seen that as well. We don't have a lot of women within our technical ranks. We have about, I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe about 4,000 skilled trades positions, of which 65 are women, right? And so being able to provide opportunity to those women to partner together, to know that they're not in it alone. We've done a lot of work with focus groups and women in trades to give them the support that they need, but also to understand what the roadblocks may be and how do we recruit and retain others. But it's really important to provide them that support and that network once they're through the door, right? How do they continue along their career path, whether it's up, sideways, whatever path it is that they choose. So important.
It's one of the things we were trying to tackle was the perception of the 24/7 that can come with the job, and areas like we take that on as a woman in terms of we're just going to have to work harder. So we're already dealing with market forces and brand expectations that this is a male-dominated world, and for us to succeed, we're going to push ourselves. And then how do we succeed when it's 24/7 and mentoring and sponsorship and everything else? So, Bonita, over to you, right? Like, how have you thought through that?
Yeah.
Get my brain right in terms of
the 24/7.
Yeah.
I'm still working now. Yeah, so stereotypes about men and women still exist, and for women, there still tends to be. The reality is that women are perceived as being too gentle, too sensitive in different areas, and a lot of times we find ourselves in positions of always trying to prove our worth, and we're constantly trying to make people aware that we are deserving to be where we are, and that a lot of times equates to us doing a lot more work, and it's not necessary. A lot of times, most often, our work can stand on its own at normal work levels. But it's just in our heads that we have to go that extra mile just to be perceived as even. So a lot of times you'll see many women taking on additional workloads, and because that's the only thing that we think that we can do. But again, we need to be more supportive of women and make sure there's equal distribution of workloads among capable male and female leaders. That aspect does not make us any less capable of being a leader. It's just something, it's more of a mindset. And it's hard to overcome, but it's something that we really have to work on.
So Anne, you made a comment in this one around the way women perceive and speak about themselves versus the male counterpart in the organisation. So do you want to talk about the way we think about ourselves and talk about ourselves?
Well, I think women tend to be self-deprecating, where men, women kind of try and point out things that they're not good at, where men just are typically a little bit more upfront and say, "Oh, I got this, I know it." Or women will say, "I'm not good at public speaking," or so I think it's something that women really kind of have to work through to be more confident within themselves, and it's
You know what I also find, not just
It is the
self-deprecating.
challenge, right?
It is a challenge to put it out, right? But it's not just being self-deprecating. What I sometimes see as a trait in women as well is being apologetic, and also being adding too much detail and adding excuse for whatever the comment that comes out of their mouth, right? Whatever that statement is. So we've got to also, I think, work a little bit harder against that natural tendency to be apologetic or to add extra detail or excuse behind the statement, and be more of standing in our success. And, I even think, I had read an article somewhere that somebody comes up to you and says, "Wow, that's an awesome suit that you're wearing today." "Oh, this? I got it at Target." You should just say, "Thank you," and walk on, right? And you might think of times when you've done that. So I have to work really hard to not do that.
My mother said that to me. "Do not admit that it was on sale." Because I was like, "It was such a great buy." She's like, "Please don't say that." It's so funny.
Building on the women think differently as well, right? You had some interesting perspective, Suzanne, especially in relation to recent High Court Justice.
Yes, yeah. No, I mean, we all saw Justice Kajania Jackson be sworn in, and I loved what she said. She said, "I will practice law without fear or favor," and that's a term that's been used. But when she said it, there was such a gravity to it. To hear a woman just have her moment where she said, "Look, I'm going to do this. I'm not going to pick favorites, and I'm not going to be fearful." For a woman to say that, it's like awesome, because every day you're kind of like, okay, do I have to kind of play favorites here in order to get to where I need to go? Or am I even capable of doing that? Do I have the confidence to go for it? And for a woman to be standing there and saying this, I just thought it was amazing. I mean, women bring a different brand of business. And it's great, and we shouldn't be embarrassed of it. We should be proud of it. And I'm so grateful because, when I had my 3 kids, I couldn't even tell people I was pregnant.
Wow.
So I didn't have any maternity leaves. I had maybe 2 weeks. And now it's like 3, 4 months, 6 months, taking the time to be with your children. I mean, I'm sort of embarrassed in a sense that I didn't blaze this trail, but I'm grateful that someone did, that someone is really saying that we can do it all. Anybody who says we can't, I don't believe that. We can do it all. And And the other thing that we do is that we bring a broad view of things. And, speaking about the details and being too detailed, we have the amazing grace of being able to be detailed, but then also be able to have the broad view and then bring people on the way, and those are things that we should be proud of.
Absolutely. You go back and think about how much the industry has changed, and knowing what you know now, when you entered the industry years ago, we won't talk about how long ago, right? Many years, we won't give up our ages or anything else. Would you go back and change anything? So who wants to take that one first? Ryan, do you want to go?
For me, I am a little newer on the honor representative side of working for the Cal State system. I previously was in architecture, so it took a while for me to decide that this was the path that I was going to take. And to be honest, I wish I would have known sooner. I really enjoy working within facilities. I think my background in architecture really helped prepare me for a lot of it, but there is so many challenges that come up on a day-to-day basis, and I love problem solving. Again, just knowing that this was an opportunity and a path within architecture sooner, I would have done this 10 years ago.
As architects, right, spent a lot of time talking about the very different perspective. And Suzanne, you had a lot to say about the employee experience being really important as an architect and the lens. So
yeah, I mean, this is another thing where architecture is something that I think uniquely positions us in these roles because we, again, are taught to see so much, and we really do have, in some ways, kind of like a specialized liberal arts education, where we can talk about almost anything, and we can also really lend a creative eye, and that creative eye helps us with these kinds of problem-solving kind of missions. I mean, how many times are you like, you got a call up, the chilled water pipe has burst, and it's like, okay, and the animal facility is full of water. Okay, well, let's first get rid of the water, and so you have these kinds of things that may not, again, seem glamorous, but they really can come up with some creative solutions, and then of course you then get the opportunity to finally replace the chilled water pipe, which probably should have been changed for 50 years and no one did, But I remind myself every day that in higher education, our departments are really the guiding light. We're the ones that support the student success, and we're the ones that can really give them the spaces that they need to kind of live out their dreams. And so if we can just keep on doing that, I think we'll be, women will have an even stronger foothold in the profession.
we also talked about the importance of that mentorship and sponsorship. And if you really thought it through 25 years ago when you came into it, right, how you would do things differently. And that was quite a lot of conversation. So Erica, to you first in terms of, you went right down the mentorship side of it, and then we might come back up to the sponsorship with Bonita.
Right, yeah. So not an architect. I did choose facility management as my degree on purpose, not by accident. I don't know what that says. And with a concentration in industrial engineering. And I think, I didn't realize at the time that our professor of facility management at North Dakota State University was really being a mentor to us. There were 6 of us in the program, all women, and we were the first graduating class from NDSU because it was a brand new program many years ago, yes. And he was really focused on getting us that first internship because it was so critical to really starting your career. Some of you may have heard of him. His name is Dr. Michael Lee. He teamed up with David Kotz to write the very first facility management handbook, and they wrote the first edition. So he was very much an advocate for facility management, very much an advocate for women, and I didn't realize it at the time. It wasn't until I really got into my career, and probably 6 or 7 years later, did I realize that he had been a mentor and a sponsor, right? And that had I realized that, I would have realized how important it was to go and start building relationships early. I just was young in my career. I was going to tackle the world, go out and be strong, do what I say I'm going to do. But I didn't realize how important that mentorship piece was to build those relationships with colleagues, with decision makers, as I mentioned before. So I think had I had an earlier recognition of that, I would have embraced that so much sooner. And it's so critical to have a mentor. And it doesn't, and the mentor might change in your life as you go on. It's not going to be the same one in your career as you move and develop. And it's not necessarily somebody senior to you. It's not necessarily somebody that's even in the same industry as you, right? So those are some things to think about as you think about who you admire, respect, want to emulate, right? And somebody who's really going to give you their honest feedback and meaningful time.
So we spent a bit of time talking about, the Australian side says the advocates and enemies when it comes to sponsorship, and navigating any industry as a female in a leadership role can be incredibly challenging. And Bonita, you made a great comment in terms of the pet and the threat and the importance of sponsorship. So unpack that for us.
Sure, yeah. So most women in leadership roles have a very common dilemma. If we are strong, assertive leaders, we're viewed as domineering and abrasive. And we encounter a lot of resistance as a result. But then on the other hand, if we are not assertive enough, we're viewed as weak and just a pushover. And it makes it hard for us to get, excuse me, any cooperation or any support in organizations. So we must be able to, we understand that, we must be aware of it first, that does exist, but we also must carefully orchestrate the delivery of our management styles and our interactions with our male counterparts, so that they see us as good business strategists and partners, and not just for our gender first. So I think that's very critical. And the pet versus threat. So I did hear that before, and it's a phrase where sometimes you are perceived as, we need to help you. And a lot of times we take a secondary role of just listening, which is good sometimes, but also we have to speak up for ourselves too. But if you're in that, excuse me, that pet role, and then you suddenly kind of get your confidence, and you're letting your counterparts know that I got this, I can do this, then it's the potential of being perceived as a threat. So we have to carefully navigate that divide because it does exist. So how we interact with our counterparts on really kind of treading that it's very, yeah, it's a tightrope, but we have to be very careful with that.
Yeah. So with, like all things, like encouraging younger women coming through in terms of in their career, and whether it's architects or whether it's anything, but getting involved into the capital planning space of this, which is actually quite fascinating. So beyond the fix, but the bigger strategy and thinking and everything else. So how are you going about encouraging women? What are some of the key things that everyone in this room can pull away of how you do that? So Suzanne, do you want to go first on this one?
Well, I will say one thing. I mean, our young women are watching us. They're seeing how we excel in leadership roles, but they're also seeing how we treat one another. Again, I know I look very young, but I've been around for a while. And there was a time, and I don't know if it's completely dispelled, but there was really only room for one woman. And I think that's something that we really have to work on, as a group of people. You're all so nice. I want to work with all of you, But I can't say that about every woman I've worked with. I have to say, and I think it's important for us to just remind each other that we can be grateful and want more, and there is room for more than one woman in top leadership roles. Men have been in leadership roles for centuries, forever, right? And somehow there's multiple leaders and successful people. So I think we have to look at that. The encouraging young women to go into fields of architecture and engineering and seeing a path for themselves. I was telling the story that I used to volunteer at my career day at my all-girls Catholic high school. And for 5 years in a row, I sat at a table that no one went to see. Like, no one came to me, and I was like, oh. So at the 6th year, somebody finally came up to me and said, I think I want to be a structural engineer. I'm like, be it, yes. I'm like jumping out of my skin. I was so excited. And I think there's some things to learn about that. I mean, it took a long time to get even one person interested. I do think that because we all work in higher education, maybe we're not teaching women correctly. Maybe we're not letting them see the path. And I would say that that's maybe even true for some other underserved kind of populations where they don't see that they can be successful. They don't see that they can actually meet all of the incredible work that's required in order to be an architect or an engineer. So these are things that I think that we can really work at. I am happy to say that I also think that administrative departments and universities need to work more closely with the academic departments. I don't know why there's such a division. We're all educated people, We can actually work together. And the dean of the School of Engineering and Computing Sciences at New York Institute of Technology, he and I cooked up an idea to teach Python programming for women and caregivers. And the reason that we did that was because in December of 2020, all of the job loss in the United States was borne by women. And so then you say to yourself, okay, well, all these women probably weren't successfully employed anyway, and that's one of the reasons, right? They left because they were underemployed, or they lost their jobs and they need to get another job, but maybe they don't have the skills. So the idea, this was a 6-week Python programming course, and then after the women were finished, they were then given career opportunities and training programs to try and further their careers. That's just one example of how do you appeal to the learning styles and learning needs of women, just like we need to do in other underserved populations. And higher education is the place to do it, you know? So anyway, those are my thoughts.
So Bonita, from an architect's perspective.
I've always approached the practice of architecture from the lens of that we have to understand, in order for us to understand the spaces and the buildings to meet the needs of the building's occupants, we have to have a broad understanding, and Suzanne touched on it, of actually what they do in those spaces. I mean, will they be performing surgery in those spaces? Will they be teaching classes in those spaces? Will they be taking classes in those spaces? Will they be studying? Will they be sleeping? So having that broad understanding enables us to be a little more creative in how we approach problem solving. And not only do architects have to manage the design, but we also have to manage a varied group of consultants. We have to manage owner expectations. We have to manage budgets and administration of construction activities. That's a wide variety of different expertise that we have to have. So that, all those different management skills and expertise equipped us for this very unique and expansive knowledge base. And it's with that I'm able to talk and share with young women, especially just actually young people, of all the expertise within these fields of study. And it's not just architecture. Of course, I'm little biased, but it's not just architecture, but it's these careers that have to bring in all these different elements that touch on from the finance to the expense, all of these things. But it gives us a very formidable resume, if you will, of how, you know, you can parlay your training into a myriad of other careers, related careers in capital and facilities management. And it's been very helpful as I talk to young aspiring students and to choosing those type of careers in those fields of study. So it's been helpful.
So Erica, you had a different kind of perspective on a few things because your career has not been just a single linear way, and you brought different experiences and zigzagging different experiences. So do you want to talk about what that's meant to you and how you've gone about it?
Yeah. So you summed it up, zigzagging, I would say. So, you know, I started out in an operations role, and from there I went into some other roles that still kept me managing people, but not directly in operations. I moved into some support roles, running our technical support department of about 50 engineers, running and standing up our safety program for safety improvement, then went back into operations leadership roles, and then moved out again and led a workforce development strategy really for the organization that consisted of a lot of things that we've just been talking about. How do you really build awareness of a career in the facilities realm, and how do we specifically target the trades, the skilled trades gap, right? And that program ended up opening up kind of a whole new world to me. I stood up an apprenticeship program. I started working with not-for-profits for getting people either reemployed or to work for the first time that were in were in a situation where they were maybe previously afflicted by homelessness or poverty. Worked with women in trades groups, as I had mentioned before, and then working with high school co-ops and sponsorships and starting you know, those types of leader programs into apprenticeship programs. And what I really, I guess, found in all of that is we really need to get to our younger population earlier. Whether, you know, regardless of diversity, right? But there are still times that I would have a conversation with somebody and then they would ask me, well, what do you do? And I would say, I'm a facility manager. Oh, what's that? You can have a career in that? And, you know, so there's still so much that we can bring to that younger generation and doing it earlier. I do some work with Skills USA and Facilithon, and there's these young minds that are just ready to soak it all up, I guess is what I would say. And now I'm into a role where I've gone back into operations and leading a large team in the Southeast region. So your career doesn't have to be linear. It doesn't have to be a straight shot to the top. And I think what that's done for me and what I really, I guess, brings to the organization is understanding and having that awareness. You know, as you said, Bonita, it's not just understanding spaces, but it's understanding all the different departments, the support functions, and really how does the job get done. So it's opened up my ability, I guess, to kind of see more broadly and having worn those shoes of others so that I can be a little bit more effective in the role that I'm in.
So now we've kind of cracked the nut, right? We've rebranded ourselves, we've got people excited, we've shown them what they can do in terms of career pathing and everything else. How do we now nurture the women in the organisation? And what have you seen and done in terms of bringing that leadership for women forward? So, Rayanne, you first.
I think really trying to capture everyone's skill set and knowing what everyone's skill set is, and then really focusing in on that. You know, my team that I have is probably, we're about 60% women, and we all have very diverse backgrounds, and I really try and focus on assigning, you know, projects that are specific to, everyone's skill set. And for me, I really kind of think about like what my background is. And I always say I have my toolbox and I have my tool belt. And everything that's in my tool belt are the skills I use on a day-to-day basis. And sometimes I have to go back to my toolbox and try and find my wrench and figure out how I do it, something with, that tool. And I just think of my entire team as kind of very similar. They're my toolbox. They're the ones that, get it done when needed. And really also just developing those relationships with all of our clients, our consultants, subject matter experts out there in the fields. They're absolutely imperative. So, yeah.
You had a tip and trick in talking about nurturing leadership that you talked about was the get on the call 5 minutes early with any of the team and just start asking those questions and building those connections. So what are some other ideas and tips and tricks in terms of just constantly trying to bring our teams along in terms of that leadership journey?
Yeah, I really think it's important, getting to the meetings 5 minutes early, touching base with your team, really finding out, kind of what Lonnie had talked about in the Red Shoes presentation, finding that 20%, what drives people, what is that 20%. I have really realized that those touch points, knowing the custodian's daughter's name when he comes in and cleans our office, asking, about their granddaughters, and just finding that human element and connection is so important.
Suzanne, you were talking about how we treat people and want to be treated as really important of nurturing leadership.
Yeah. First of all, I have to say that was just lovely. You're absolutely right. I think there's a couple of things. I think that we do have to treat people as we would like to be treated. But I think somebody said yesterday, also treat them the way that they also want to be treated. I think that's also that empathy that is important to understanding how people want to be in the workplace. I will, just a little tip and trick, and to what Erica was saying, I always volunteered when my kids were little to teach a skyscraper class. And so I would bring photos of skyscrapers and we would talk about the height and how they were built, and then each of them would design a skyscraper, and so they would all draw a skyscraper. And I still remember one girl had designed this huge birthday cake skyscraper, and she had a candle on the top. And somebody had the nerve to tell her, that won't work. How are you going to light the candle? And she's like, oh no, I've got to start over, And I said, no, you meant to have a helicopter go by and light that candle every night. And she's like, yes, And I think it's just giving the exposure, giving the support, giving that little tiny path to kind of success. And again, putting yourself in that little girl's position who was so crestfallen, and saying that there's no problem. We'll just have a helicopter take care of it every night. I think, I think that these are aspects of women leadership that you just don't see every day, and things that we should work on.
The absolute touch points are gorgeous. They really are.
I want to add one little thing too. I will say, in terms of nurturing good leaders and moving forward, in working with strong female leads, I worked under a strong CFO, and I would find myself being invited to different meetings that have absolutely nothing to do, and I didn't see it at the time, had absolutely nothing to do with my area. Well, why is she inviting me to this meeting? I'd get to the meetings, and it'd be about, I don't know, enrollment, just basic enrollment, nothing from a facilities perspective, but just a business aspect from a CFO's perspective. But it wasn't until after sitting in the meetings and just listening that I realized that what she was doing, and she was preparing me to be more diverse and to have that knowledge, just to be in the room so that I could assist, maybe sometime down the road with being in a more leadership role. And, now I'm on executive cabinet, and I'm doing all these other things. And so those are the kind of little tidbits that that I'm sharing with people under me, and bringing them along, because it's important to nurture that as well, because it didn't click for me as to, I don't even know why I'm in this meeting. But at the time, it's very critical, because I didn't realize how much knowledge was being infused in me by having that opportunity.
That's a great sponsor, having your career as well, to think through those things. Something for us all to take away.
Yeah.
Actually. So Erica, when you get a weird meeting in your calendar, we'll work through that one.
Right, exactly.
So we've got 10 minutes left. So we wanted to open up for any Q&A, and then we're all going to close on one note, which is the one thing that each of us want you to take away from this session. So any questions?
Pete, let me give you the microphone.
Thanks, Mike. Great topic, by the way. And so, knowing what you know today, and you had the opportunity to go in a time machine, go back 30 years, you walk into a facilities room of old white men in the facilities office, okay? What would you tell those old white men in facilities if you had the opportunity to know what you know today?
Who wants to take that one? We probably all, I can answer.
Well, I guess I'll start.
I walked into a room 30 years ago.
So I had one of those curmudgeons, and he was part of the union workforce in Chicago, downtown Chicago. He'd been in that role for 40 years. His tool shop, that was his, and it probably wouldn't have mattered what I looked like, right? Nobody was going in that space. But I could just see, I come bebopping in at 25 years old, this little blonde girl, right? And I could just see that he was going to not only did not like having me there, but he was going to make my life hell. It was just, I knew it, right? So, what I did instead, I wish I had something to say to him. And actually, probably what I would have said is, just hang on, let's see where we're at in a year from now. And you might have a different perspective. Just give me an opportunity to show you that I can make a difference. I will support you. I've got your back. I'm going to build this team. We're going to bring training and development, all these things, which he didn't want any of anyways. But, and then what ends up happening is you deliver on what you say you're going to do. You end up having other people that respect you. And now you've got a team of, 18 engineers that respect you, and the 19th one doesn't. Now he's the odd man out, and he's getting pressure from his peers to step it up and not be such a curmudgeon, right?
I would just add that that has happened to me. And the first thing I did is I actually listened to what they had to say, and I appreciate it. I thank them for what they had to say about whatever subject. And then I offered another opinion, and again, it's more about the delivery. Once they realize, okay, maybe she does know what she's talking about. We might not say it, but then there's that respect there.
I mean, I think it's just like any time you're starting out a job. You're always in a pool of people you don't know, and the first step is to make sure that they know that you're with them, and then the other step is to make sure that they know it's going to be okay. I do think that's something that we have to impart as women leaders, and also in support of diversity in leadership, and that is it's going to be okay. We can work together, we can learn from each other, and I too was in the same spot, and we just kind of, it's the same thing. You have to show that you're with them, not just say that you're with them, and then ultimately everyone learns from each other. So,
I'm an accountant, so you can imagine going into a construction site the first time with a bunch of wily old Australian Aussie men in their big boots and hats, and my boss at the time gave me an excellent piece of advice. He said, "Go in, ask lots of questions." Continue to be curious. You're naturally curious. You're not a normal accountant, right? I was never in the back office room adding up beans or anything like that. So, but I was naturally curious around how things work. And I think that came from my childhood. I grew up with marine engineers, and on a farm. So I was always, how do things get pushed together, pulled apart? So I just kept asking lots of questions. And I learned a lot, and I fed back that I was appreciative of the learnings I was getting. But they also then ultimately kind of welcomed me in because I was curious in terms of what they did. And I listened to understand, and I took on what they said. So yeah, that's just my natural state.
Thank you. I think I have the next question. I wanted to share, first of all, I want to say thank you to all of you. And I wanted to share an experience I had professionally that backfired. And it was, I still think, several years ago, and I still think about it. And I want to share it with you and see if you have any kind of after the fact advice for me. And just to give you a little bit of context, I'm the father of a daughter that has a degree in mechanical engineering and has served our country as an officer in the United States Marine Corps. So I'm very supportive of strong women and see women as leaders. In my role professionally, I'm the Assistant Vice President for Facilities Management. Planning, design, and construction is one of the areas under my area of responsibility. And 2 of our 3 senior project managers happen to be women. And we, several years ago, completed 2 big projects on campus. One was a brand new building out of the ground. Another one was a major renovation of one of our legacy buildings on campus. And when their buildings were completed, kind of in the write-up and the press release, I highlighted that they were both led by women senior project managers. And I was really intending to celebrate them. And they both got upset with me that I pointed out that they were female. And it really kind of rocked me because I know in my heart I only had good intentions and was really, really proud of them and was trying to celebrate them. And but I also had to accept and listen very carefully. And I wrote them personal letters afterwards, apologizing that I somehow missed the mark on this. And so just I don't mind sharing that. I was disappointed. I was embarrassed that I offended them when I was trying to celebrate them. But who better to give me advice about that than women leaders? So tell me how I could have done better, or how I could do better next time, please.
The tightrope of branding. I can say from my side, and everyone will have different perspectives. Before I send out any communication, I engage the people that are in the communication, whoever it is, just so that they're comfortable. And whether that's in celebrating success or bringing on a new hire, I'd always put your starting position out in terms of what you do, but get their buy-in. So
I would agree with that because you don't know what their experiences are with how you're presenting the information. You have to see what their perspective is going to be and how they'll.
I think that's really good advice. I'm going to liken it to a group in my neighborhood that I live in New York City. The Department of Transportation wanted to take over a street and put a park there. And the entire neighborhood was against it. And the Department of Transportation's like, who wouldn't want a park? It's like, well, all the nurses who are working in the hospital a block away who have nowhere else to park because it happens to be free parking. But again, no one would ever have known, So I think, the advice is good, just check out first. And of course, they'll immediately know that you had all the best intentions. But it's another opportunity to make a great connection,
Well, we're out of time, but I want to thank you. This was an amazing discussion. Thank you for being obviously sharing everything here. And we'll obviously do a write-up on this for the HEF blog. I think it's a great topic, and I'd like to see this in further events. Thank you so much.
thank you.